my name is Oralee OByrne, and I'm the curator-manager here of the Age of Sail Museum. The museum started in 1994 was when we first opened our doors. It was a community effort. The land that we're on was a shipyard back in the 1840s, 1850s. Originally there was actually a quarantine house on the land where sailors were quarantined when they came back from their voyages. And so there was nothing here at the time. It was part of Scott's paper, and some local people, including my father, thought it was a shame that our history was being lost. And so they decided to build a museum. So the original building was built in 1854, and it's a Methodist church. It was used for about 50 years when the congregation outgrew it, so they built what's considered the new church, the United Church. And it was moved about 100 yards and became owned by one of the shipbuilders who used it as a sail loft. During World War I, he loaned it to the militia to use as a rifle range, and then he donated it back to the community, and it became the Cochrane Hall Community Center for about 50, 60 years. So over the years, the museum has grown from 750 artifacts in one building to 7 buildings and about 3,500 artifacts.
Wow.
So the building that we're in now is our newest building. We built it in 2013, opened it in 2014, and it resembles the hull of the ship. So, yeah. So that's pretty much the history of the site.
So about your shipbuilding,
Yes.
there was a lot of ships built here?
Between Parrsboro and Apple River, which is about 52 kilometers, there were over 700 tall ships built. This was one of the first shipyards. As I said, there was a quarantine house. One of the early shipbuilders came from the West Indies, and he actually built a barrel cooperage on the site, which was run by his West Indies slaves. And so there is a house in the village, actually, that still has the metal shackles in the basement where the slaves were kept. It was his original home. So eventually the slaves were freed, but that's sort of the early history of this site. We know of at least 6 vessels built on this site, but there could be more that the registrations are very odd.
Yeah.
So shipbuilding in the area actually lasted until 1970s. They built minesweepers during World War II in the village of Port Greville.
Wow.
And continued building fishing boats until the shipyard was destroyed in a hurricane in 76. So it's got a long history. So there's lots of ghost stories on the shore. I remember my father, when I was a kid, telling me the ghost stories about, there's actually a place a couple of kilometers down the road called Ghost Hollow. And one of the ghost stories from there that is most vivid was actually about my family. My grandfather supposedly was one of the most honest people that you would ever meet. And he had told of the story of, he was in a horse and buggy going through Ghost Hollow, and he saw a man, and he stopped and asked him if he'd like a ride, and the man nodded. So he got in the wagon, and they went up to the other side of Ghost Hollow, and the man motioned that he wanted to get out. So my grandfather stopped, and he turned around, and there was nobody there. There was no footprints in the snow or anything. It was so yeah, I get goosebumps even
cool
talking
story.
about it.
That's a cool story. What about this location? You get some things here?
Yeah, I've had some really strange occurrences here. I think the first one that sticks out in my mind was back in 2007. A very good friend of mine, he was a mentor to me, Jack Wagstaff, was a volunteer with the museum, and his father had actually been the last shipbuilder here. And he was almost like a second father to me, because my dad at that time was suffering dementia quite badly, so Jack sort of filled the void for me. and he hadn't been feeling well, and he was here, and then he went back to see his doctor in St. John's, and he said he'd call me when he found out, when he was coming back. And so I'd come in the week before. We'd gotten a couple of very nicely framed plaques, and one was about his dad, and I had them hanging side by side on the wall, and they'd been up for a week, no problem. And I came in the morning, and I opened the door, and the plaque was sitting against the wall on the floor. And it wasn't on its face, it wasn't crooked, it looked like somebody had taken it off the wall and set it down. And I thought, well, maybe my mother, who had the keys, maybe she had taken it down for something. So I didn't think anything of it, and I put it back up on the wall. And an hour later, my friend Jack called me, and he said, I've got bad news. I've got 4 weeks to live, and there's nothing they can do. And it was just, I got such a chill, because it was his father's plaque that had been sitting on the floor. And I asked my mother, because she was the only other one with the keys, if she had moved it, and she looked at me like I was just out of my mind. She said, well, it must have fallen, but I couldn't see any way it could possibly have fallen and not landed the way it was. So that was sort of the first thing that made me think, whoa, that's just really too coincidental of all the stuff in the museum that would be the thing.
Yeah.
And then I get goosebumps even talking about it. My father, I was very close to my father. I'm the baby of the family and the only girl, so we were very close. And my father passed away in 2011. And I've always kind of felt like he was with me. I've had some really bizarre things happen, especially at my home. There was one time I lost my debit card for CIBC, which is bright red. And I was so upset. I couldn't figure out where I'd left it, and I tore the house apart. My husband helped search. And I was in tears, and I said, I need that. I'm so upset with myself. And I turned around, walked into the living room, and I have a white runner on the table, and right in the middle of that white runner was the CIBC card. And there is no way it was there before. It was just no way. And so things like this kept happening. My dad was a practical joker, so I could definitely see him doing this type of stuff. I'd go to find a pencil sharpener, and it wasn't where I left it. And so after a while, I'd start joking and go, okay, Dad, I need the pencil sharpener. And within an hour, it would be somewhere. That I know it wasn't, but. And my mom, she lives up the road here, and I tell her these things, and she'd kind of laugh at me, yeah, right. Mm-hmm. And then one day, she called me up, and she had been looking for her broom. And she had been searching for a week for this broom. And she called, do you think that Jeff, did he take it out to one of the sheds? I've looked, and I said, no. And she said, well, I've been looking for this damn broom for over a year. And I said, or for a week, and I said, well, ask Dad for it back. She said, yeah, right. And I said, no, seriously. I said, you go stand in the middle of the living room, and you say, Ross, it's not funny anymore, I want the damn broom back. She called me up hours later, and she said, you won't believe it. And I said, what? And she said, I did exactly what you told me, and I turned around, and the damn broom was leaning against his chair.
Against his chair.
And she had looked for it for a week and couldn't find it. So, so I don't know, I think he haunts me. But he was always a practical joker in life. So, and I remember having talks about the paranormal with him, because he had some intuition type deja vu things, and we had said to each other at one point, if there's an afterlife and you can come back and tell me, find a way to let me know. And I really think he has, I really do. And after we built this building, we put up the new TVs, and we have one in here and one in the other building. And after this building opened, every once in a while, usually we turn the TV on in the morning so it's ready if people come in. And I'd come in and the TV would be off. And at first I thought, okay, well, one of the guys or somebody has been turning it off. And so I started asking the staff, no, we never turned it off. We never turned it off. And so I'd come in, I'd turn it on again, and we'd wait an hour, and we'd come back, and the TV would be off. And it never started happening until we put the picture of my father up.
There you go.
So I'm sure, I can't see it being the TV, because it's exactly the same as the other one, and the other one doesn't shut itself off.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I kind of think.
He's playing tricks on you
I
here
think
too.
he is doing tricks, but it's,
Just letting you know he's still here.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
It is, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't, it doesn't scare me or anything. It's actually quite comforting to think that he's still here. Antiques are pretty, but the natural... Antiques are pretty, but the natural